Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony, the Great Rivardo. Today we're talking J.J. Watt from the Houston Texans, and a little bit of rumors going around that J.J. Watt could be a cut candidate for Houston. He's going to be counting $17 million against the cap this season. They could be looking to trade him. He really hasn't gotten the clarity that he desires and he really deserves from the organization up to this point. We know Houston's been an absolute disaster and a mess as of late with how they treated Deshaun Watson in their head coaching search. And everything in between. They just really haven't been doing things the right way and keeping their best players and their focal points in perspective and really putting them in the conversation of who they want to hire and everything around that. Because, when you have a player like Deshaun Watson, Anthony's a big advocate for him. Obviously he's a top 5 pick there, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And, you have to include guys like that in your conversations. If you want him to be the future, he should be a big part of, what they're going to be doing with their coaching, the designs, the coordinators, how you want to play your game. So I think, this is something they're going to have to look at with J.J. Watt, too, who's been a really respectful player to them over the past, decade or so. Really been great for the city of Houston. He deserves all the respect in the world, and Houston doesn't seem to be giving it to him. They have kind of kept him in the dark as of late. And J.J. Watt even said to Deshaun Watson in the last game of the season for them, while they're walking off the field, I'm really sorry, he said. I'm really sorry that we wasted one of your prime years. And for J.J. Watt to say that tells me one thing. He does not believe the Texans are a good team right now. And I think, for Houston, maybe it's better that they let him walk, they let him go, they trade him to a team. I know his brother's on Pittsburgh. Maybe that's an opportunity for him. But I do know that the Giants could use an interior big pass rusher who could, match up and maybe replace Leonard Williams. Maybe a guy that could even be better than Leonard Williams if they're going to do a 3-year contract. We're going to talk about a couple scenarios here that could make sense for the Giants. And if you guys think maybe J.J. Watt could be a good fit on this team. But before we dive into J.J. Watt and everything in between, Anthony, my friend, how you doing?
I'm doing good. This is an interesting little topic of discussion to me because J.J. Watt, when you look at it from first glance, you're like, yeah, man, get J.J. Watt. If you can get J.J. Watt, get him. But then you look at it a little further and you're like, okay, well, maybe it actually doesn't make that much sense for the Giants to do this. You look at the way that our team is structured. You look at our interior defensive line. That's the strongest part of our team. And J.J. Watt is an interior defensive lineman. He's a really great pass rusher from that 3-tech position. He'll get in there basically playing defensive end, but in the 3-4, he's a 3-tech. So, he's a very good pass rusher in that regard. He's just a dominant player, great run stuffer. At one point, J.J. Watt was he is like historically one of the best defenders to ever play in the NFL. His injuries kind of derailed the second half of his career. But, he has come back from that. He was healthy this past season, played 16 games, and things were a little tough for him. He wasn't the dominant player that we all knew and loved in J.J. Watt and the great player, But I think when you look at it and you look at the Giants, they've got 2 interior defensive linemen that are about to be free agents. Dalvin Thompson and Leonard Williams are both about to hit free agency, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with them, and I think that's really what this J.J. Watt, rumor that's swirling around, that's where the Giants could come into play. Depending on what happens to Leonard Williams and Dalvin Thompson in free agency, then I think J.J. Watt could be somebody that they definitely consider, at the interior defensive line position.
Yeah, and on Good Morning Football, Ian Rappaport did say that the relationship between Houston and J.J. Watt's a little murky at the moment, and something could change, and it could happen soon. But with J.J. Watt, like Anthony mentioned, he was healthy last year. He played all 16 games. He only picked up 5 sacks, 52 tackles, 17 quarterback hits, and 14 tackles for a loss. This is one of his down years, but it's hard to really, blame him because Houston's defense has been so bad that how do you expect J.J. Watt to really even get after the quarterback when your cornerbacks and your secondary can't hold up? Think about the Giants this year. A lot of their sacks were coverage sacks. That's a really, really good sign because that means your secondary is doing really, really great things and they're shutting down opposing receivers and they're locking them down. And it gives your pass rushers that much more of an advantage to take advantage of, having a great secondary. So when you have J.J. Watt, you bring him to the Giants, theoretically, let's say they bring him in, they trade for him, or they they're the highest bidder if Houston ends up cutting him. But, in my opinion, you bring in a guy like that, and you have a good secondary, you have another guy like Dalvin Tomlinson, and in this scenario in my head, I'm looking at kind of like this. The Giants, in this scenario, let Leonard Williams walk in free agency. Mainly because I think J.J. Watt and him are pretty similar in terms of their pass rush ability at this point. Even J.J. Watt's 31 years old. I think he's still capable of being an elite pass rusher, maybe even better than Leonard Williams. And we know he's been a very, very great run stopper his entire career. He's easily one of the best defensive lines in the 3-4 that you can find. And he'll actually be cheaper than Leonard Williams. So let's say they manage to trade for him and give away like some mid-round picks. I don't think they're going to really want a ton for him based on the fact that they're going to cut him anyway. No one's going to really give him and blow them out of the water with a crazy deal. So let's say the Giants manage to give a decent, like maybe a couple assets, maybe Evan Ingram and a mid-round pick. Let's say Evan Ingram and a mid-round pick. We'll leave it at that. And J.J. Watt, he comes to the Giants. And he's making $17 million next year, right? So he's making $17 million in 2021. That's probably $3 million or more, less than Leonard Williams is going to make per year. So you're already getting a cheaper guy in the process. And I don't think Leonard Williams is going to get 3 years or more. I think he's going to get 3 years, 4 years max. I don't see 4 years or more than that. So, have J.J. Watt, you extend him the second you acquire him, you extend him for another 2 years. That way you have him for 3 years. He's cheaper per season than Leonard Williams, right? And that extra money actually allows you to keep Dalvin Tomlinson. So now you have J.J. Watt, a historically just fantastic player who we know can play well with a good defense. You have Dalvin Tomlinson, who's one of the best run defenders in the NFL and has only grown every single year. I think he's just going to get better and better, especially as they get used to Patrick Graham's scheme. And then you have Dexter Lawrence, who's been making massive strides. He actually was double-teamed the most of any interior defensive lineman this year on the Giants. And in the NFL, he's one of the highest double-teamed defensive linemen. So he's been an absolute stud. You have Dalvin Thompson, J.J. Watt, good secondary, good linebackers. Maybe you get an outside linebacker in the draft, second, third round. You have O'Shane Ximines and Lorenzo Carter coming back. I think that's a pretty good unit. I think that J.J. Watt still has some gas left in the tank, and he's only missed 8 games over the last 3 years. So that's not like an exponentially, that's not a worrisome problem for me. We're sitting here right now talking about Saquon Barkley coming back, and he's missed almost 2 full years. And the last year, he basically had a whole year of injury. He had a high ankle sprain, and we're talking about him coming back, and we don't know what he's going to look like. So, Anthony, my friend, what do you think the Giants could potentially offer Houston to acquire J.J. Watt? And do you think it would be a decent move if they managed to extend him for, 2 more years and they could get him for maybe cheaper than Leonard Williams?
Yeah, personally, I wouldn't trade for J.J. Watt. I would leave it up to whether or not Houston cuts J.J. Watt. If J.J. Watt says, I don't want to play here anymore, can you guys please cut me and reward me for all of the great things that I've done for you over the years? I think that's really a more likely scenario. In terms of the Giants acquiring him, at least. I don't think we really have the draft capital to be trading for a 32-year-old defensive lineman at this point. The big difference between Leonard Williams and J.J. Watt is age, right? Leonard Williams is 26 years old. J.J. Watt is 32 years old. That's a huge difference, and that's where the money comes into play, right? When we're talking about how much J.J. Watt's going to get paid and we're talking about how much Leonard Williams is going to get paid, well, of course, the younger guy who has the higher ceiling is going to get paid more. So J.J. Watt, yeah, he might be cheaper, but he's also not going to be around as long, even if you extend him for 2 years. With Leonard Williams, you extend him for 3 years, and then after that, you give him another contract for another 3 years, and you have a long-term building block that you can just keep building your defense around and keep growing a culture with. J.J. Watt, of course, he would be great in any culture. He's just such a great person. We saw what he did for the city of Houston and for the state of Texas when they were ravaged by that hurricane in years past. He raised so much money. When you talk about culture and you want a leader, J.J. Watt, it definitely comes to mind. He is an excellent person, an excellent leader, and an excellent player. He still is a good player. One thing that I want to throw out there and keep in mind, so before I mention the draft capital I think it would require to get him, one thing I want to throw out there for J.J. Watt, this past season he played a full 16 games, and his stats really weren't the crazy J.J. Watt stats that we're used to seeing, right? 16 games, he had 5 sacks and 52 combined tackles with only 14 tackles for loss, which is a respectable season, good season, not the season that Leonard Williams had, though. One thing I want to say about that, Leonard Williams was playing alongside Dalvin Tomlinson and Dexter Lawrence and Blake Martinez and a couple guys off the edge who were pretty productive, right? What was J.J. Watt really playing with? Not much. Jadeveon Clowney left the Texans this offseason. He wasn't a huge gain for whichever team got him, which was, ended up being the Tennessee Titans. He wasn't a huge gain for them, but he kind of was a big loss for J.J. Watt. That just more double teams on J.J. Watt, more eyes on J.J. Watt, not worrying about that edge presence because they didn't have it. They didn't have that edge presence. So once Jadeveon Clowney was gone, it was different for J.J. Watt. He went to Seattle and then he went to Tennessee, but J.J. Watt really hasn't been the same without that edge presence helping him and taking up some of those blocks ever since then. So I do think that he would get into the Giants lineup, right? Let's say theoretically J.J. Watt comes to the Giants. He'd get in this lineup, and I think he would still be good and productive, But I think until the Giants get that edge rusher, I don't know how productive he's going to be unless he's playing alongside like a Leonard Williams or a Dalvin Thompson. Dexter Lawrence, I guess, that might help him out too. But J.J. Watt, I don't know if at this stage in his career, after all these injuries at 32 years old, if he's really going to be your premier number one guy at this stage in his career. I feel like he needs a Batman and a Robin in order to succeed. And in terms of what it would take to get him, I still think the teams are going to value J.J. Watt. You look at him historically as one of the greatest defenders in NFL history. I do think he's at least a third-round pick. I think, honestly, a team might give up a second-round pick. One of those contending teams that has a late second-round pick that they're fine with giving up for. But in terms of Houston, they really could cut him because in 2021 he has zero dead cap. So they could just free up $17.5 million in their salary cap. So I could actually see him getting cut if he doesn't want to be there anymore. Especially if they trade Deshaun Watson, might be just a domino effect. They blow it up. They trade Deshaun Watson, they cut J.J. Watt, and then, they start building through the draft with whatever capital they get from the Deshaun Watson trade. I could see all those things happening, but I don't know if I necessarily see the Giants bidding on J.J. Watt in free agency. I don't know if they have the cap for it, and I don't know if they're really going to sacrifice Leonard Williams for 32-year-old J.J. Watt.
Yeah, and that's obviously a very good argument. This is a hypothetical, and what I will say is if you look back to 2018, that's his most recent campaign where it was like, okay, damn, he had a really good year. And when you look at the players that he had around him, it starts to make sense why. These past 2 years, especially this past season, they had nobody to help him. Absolutely nobody. You look at 2018, J.J. Watt had 17 sacks, right? And then he just falls off. Players of his quality don't go from 17 sacks to 4 and then 5 sacks unless something is going on around them. Houston obviously traded away DeAndre Hopkins. And let me actually list off some of the players that were around him in 2018. Zach Cunningham, Bernardrick McKinney, Tyrann Mathieu. You got the Honey Badger there, Justin Reed, Kareem Jackson, Jonathan Joseph, Jadeveon Clowney, Whitney Merciless, DJ Reader. 90% of those guys are no longer there. Okay, so think about all the defenders that he had around him to help him succeed. Now they're all gone. Now it's just him. It's just him trying to do all of it by himself. And no wonder his stats are so bad. They're just double teaming him. All you have to do is double team J.J. Watt, triple team J.J. Watt, and you can do whatever you want on offense against Houston. So I think that's a direct correlation, just not having more talent around him to help. So with that being said, I think the Giants defense, you bring them over to a team that has Dexter Lawrence, has Dalvin Thompson, has Blake Martinez, has James Bradbury, has McKinney. They're going to get another cornerback, hopefully. They have Darnay Holmes. They got O'Shane coming back. They got Lorenzo Carter coming back. Maybe they get another pass rusher. This is not a bad team by any means. These guys have some talent, and way more than Houston does by a long shot. So I think, in my opinion, you bring a guy like J.J. Watt in, not only is he going to be cheaper, which allows you to keep Dalvin Tomlinson, but he's also not done. At 32 years old, I don't think he's done just yet. I think he has plenty of action. He has that old man strength now. And that old man strength, do not underestimate old man strength. Those freaking grandpas, man, they can hit you. So J.J. Watt, man, I'm not giving up on him just yet. I think if the Giants were looking to, wait until they cut him, they get all that dead cap off the roster at $17 million. I think the Giants might be able to get him for a little bit cheaper, maybe $16 million per season. I would honestly take J.J. Watt for the next 3 years on $16 million per season than Leonard Williams for the next 3 years on, $22 million per season. Because let's say Leonard Williams goes somewhere else and signs a 3-year deal. Let's say he does that. Then the Giants could just turn around after that 3-year deal, and then J.J. Watt's gone and say, let's just bring back Leonard Williams if we want to. Or we'll go a younger guy. We'll draft a guy. We'll see what happens there. J.J. Watt is one of the premier players in the league, and I still think he is. Now, with that being said, I'm not going to sit here and act like Leonard Williams wasn't an absolute monster for us last year. He had a career-high 11.5 sacks. That's really impressive. He was, one of the best interior defenders in the league when it came to putting pressure on the quarterback. He's a fantastic run defender. He doesn't get injured. I mean, he is an asset. He is a commodity that you need on your defense, and he's obviously a player the Giants are not going to let walk. And if they did, I'd be very surprised. So either way, if there's a bunch of different scenarios here where I could see it being a positive move, whether it's J.J. Watt or Leonard Williams. But do you think, Anthony, that Leonard Williams is going to keep building off of this campaign? Because this was his best year, and we haven't seen him string together 4 or 5 seasons of that quality of play. Do you think Leonard Williams is going to get better, or do you think now he gets paid and maybe he takes a step back? Maybe he's like, I got paid now. I'm not gonna go full hard speed. I don't think that's the case. I think he's a hard worker. But what do you think goes on with that scenario?
Yeah, I don't think that any regression from Leonard Williams would be correlated to the fact that he got paid. I think it would be correlated to the fact that him getting paid forced us to move on from Dalvin Tomlinson. I think continuity on the defensive line, then you're going to see Leonard Williams continue to build and be a premier player year in and year out, right? Because when you look at the stats, he had a similar pressure total in 2019 that he had in 2020. But the difference is, I think that he was just a step further in on those pressures, getting those sacks because he had better players around him. I think that was really the key difference in terms of converting those pressures into sacks, which is having better talent around them, because the Giants had quite a lot of talent on defense this year. We went into the year thinking that they didn't. They really did. And they also played in a phenomenal defensive scheme that Patrick Graham put together. So I think that continuity will be key. Continuity is always key on the offensive line, right? We always talk about the offensive line. We're talking about how we had a brand new left tackle, brand new left guard, brand new center, same right guard, but brand new right tackle. So zero continuity across the offensive line, right? Everyone was playing next to somebody that they've never played with before. Same thing goes on the defensive line. Leonard Williams, Dalvin Thompson, Dexter Lawrence are all phenomenal players, but they just got better and better by playing together, and they all really enjoyed playing together, and they had great camaraderie. They all became really good close friends. That was very evident with their social media posts and what they would say in interviews with how they were hanging out, watching anime and playing video games together. They were all really cool, real tight. And I think that's really crucial for Leonard Williams. If he does get paid, he is the long-term answer here, right? We know he is, and we assume that he will get paid. I think keeping him with that group of guys is when you'll see him continue to build, maybe hit 13 sacks one year, maybe just continue to hover around the 10 sacks thing, right? Because I think that if you pull one of those guys out of there and you have a severe talent drop-off, then you're probably going to see Leonard Williams take a step back along with that drop-off in talent at the position that you pull out of there, right? So say Dalvin Thompson leaves, I think that correlates to Leonard Williams having a slight regression. But Leonard Williams still will be a good player, and I think that if you look at it a certain way, right, and you say, well, let's throw J.J. Watt into this lineup. My problem with that is, what position is J.J. Watt going to play? What position is Dexter Lawrence going to play? And what position is Leonard Williams going to play? Unless you're talking about keeping Dalvin Tomlinson, he's going to play that nose tackle role, that zero tech, and then you're going to continue to have Dexter and now J.J. play those three tech positions, right, in the 3-4 defense. Well, what if you lose Leonard Williams? If you lose Dalvin Tomlinson, right, then you don't have a zero tech. So who's going to play there? You're going to move Dexter Lawrence over to zero tech? That makes the most sense, but then you're kind of sacrificing his pass rushing ability because he's a great pass rushing interior defensive lineman. Where are you going to put J.J. Watt? You're going to put him at zero tech? You're going to put Leonard at zero tech? Neither one of those guys belong at zero tech. They all belong at three tech. So to me, when I really dive deep into this scenario, it just doesn't make sense for the Giants. I'm actually not sure why Matt Miller thinks that it's a good fit for the Giants, because personally, when you look at it, yeah, I understand we have two impending free agent defensive linemen, but they all play different positions on the interior defensive line, and you can't just move them along and expect them to still be good, productive players at different positions. It's like taking a right tackle and putting him at left tackle. He's not going to be the same. He has to relearn a new position, right? It's the same principles, but not the same position. So I think it's the same thing when you're talking about bringing J.J. Watt into this. I think the way that the Giants' defensive line is constructed right now is perfect. The only way that I would be okay with a change is if we got another zero tech and Dalvin left, and then we got a really good zero tech, maybe one that could rush the passer a little more.
I was gonna say, I was just about to say, I knew you were thinking Ailey McNeil this whole time. I was like waiting for you to stop so I could be like, I know you're thinking Ailey McNeil.
You knew I was just, all of this was coming back around to my third round gem, Ailey McNeil out of NC State. Keep an eye on him. Everybody who loves our draft content, keep an eye on our content around Ailey McNeil. I think a lot of you fans are going to fall in love with him too. I think maybe we can make a video so big on Ailey McNeil it blows up and he shoots up to the first round of the draft. Probably not, but Ailey McNeil is a special player. But really, like I mentioned, my main point here, though, is that there are positions on the defensive line. We group them all in as IDLs, interior defensive linemen, but it's more nuanced than that. There's zero techs, there's one techs, there's three techs, two techs, all that stuff, five techs. There's a difference between all of those positions, and you can't just have three techs out there. You need a zero tech, and Dalvin Tomlinson's at zero tech. And I don't think that you can swap J.J. Watt for Dalvin Tomlinson and expect this defensive line to continue to play at the same level, because you still need that zero tech.
Right, and here's my scenario that might interest you, right? So if you sign Leonard Williams, the probability of them bringing back Dalvin Tomlinson is tough. It becomes lower. Just automatically based on the cap situation. They're saying it could drop as low as 175. They're predicting 185. That's still a massive decrease of about $23 million. And now you have to cut players. You can't re-sign players. You have to backload contracts. It makes things really difficult. We're going to see a lot of really quality players hit the market this year, guys. So keep an eye out for cornerbacks, especially veteran cornerbacks, that we might go out and try to find one for a cheap deal because they're not going to be signing long-term extensions. They're not going to be signing big one-year deals. It's going to be like cost-efficient one-year contract, play well, and then catapult that, compound it into a big contract 2022 and beyond. That's what I'm expecting. But when it comes to, what Anthony mentioned with the zero techs, Dalvin Thompson is your zero tech. And in this scenario, just, let me know in the comments what you think. Anthony, I want to get your opinion too. If you resign Leonard Williams, most likely you're not resigning Dalvin Thompson. So then you have to find another zero tech, and you have to keep, obviously you have Dexter Lawrence there. So you have Leonard Williams, a new zero tech that doesn't have any experience, probably a rookie, and then you have Dexter Lawrence. In an alternative reality, think about this. You get J.J. Watt, he's cheaper, right? He's about $4 million cheaper than Leonard Williams is per year. You re-sign Dalvin Thompson with that money because maybe there's a $1 million, $2 million differential. You can fit it into the cap space. You can make it work. You can get Dalvin Thompson back. So now you have J.J. Watt, who is, we know how good J.J. Watt is. I don't need to sit here and tell you. He's been relatively healthy the past 3 years, only missed 8 games. So I'm okay with it. I'm not totally against it for the injury reason. And then you have Dalvin Thompson, who's still your zero tech, so you still have the continuity there, and you have Dexter Lawrence. So you have one of the premier 3-tech pass-rushing interior defenders in the NFL in J.J. Watt, who is an absolute god run defender. You have Dalvin Thompson, who's a run defender, who also picked up about 4 sacks this past year, and you have and then you have Dexter Lawrence, who can also rush the passer really adequately from a 3-tech spot, and also move around and play zero tech as well. Those 3 guys right there, I think I would rather those 3 guys than Leonard Williams, a rookie zero tech, and Dexter Lawrence. So, what do you think about that scenario? Would you prefer to have JJ, Dalvin, and Dexter? Does that sound good to you? Even if the injuries might scare you a little bit, even if, Leonard Williams is cheaper or really a little bit just younger and has more potential?
Yeah, well, okay, so the one that I prefer the most is Leonard, Dalvin, and Dexter. Keep them all together. So I'll just throw that out there. That's the one that I prefer the most. But in terms of letting Leonard go or JJ go, logistically, in terms of what positions they play, it actually does make more sense to let Leonard Williams go just because you need that zero tech. Unless you want to convert Dexter Lawrence to the zero tech, which you could do. I've seen people say that in the past. They think that he's like a run-stuffing nose tackle. Like, he's really not. He really is better at that 3-tech because he's such a good pass rusher and he commands double teams in that regard, which is so much more important than doing it in the running game sometimes. So I don't really want to move him to zero tech, but we could. And then, I guess, what do you want, more talent or better scheme fit? That's the question, because more talent, you get Leonard, you get JJ, and you keep Dexter Lawrence as well, right? That's the more talent, but the better scheme fit would be to keep Dalvin, JJ, and Dexter, just because that they all play those positions that are opened up with that absence of Leonard Williams. So that one makes more sense, but like I said, I'd just rather keep the core 3 at this point, and not to mention the fact that when you look at how much Dalvin's going to cost and you look at how much JJ's going to cost, I got to assume that J.J. Watt, one of the greatest defenders in NFL history, is just based on that alone going to get a lot of money, and more money than Dalvin Tomlinson, because Dalvin Tomlinson's one of those guys. Giants fans know him real well. Maybe Cowboys fans and other teams in our division know him real well. But if you look around the NFL, I feel like a lot of fan bases don't really know who Dalvin Tomlinson is. He's very slept on. He's very under the radar, but he's very good. He is one of the best interior defensive linemen in football, but he plays a position that doesn't really get talked about a lot. That zero tech, that nose tackle, doesn't really get talked about a lot. And he's not like dominating, so he's not putting up, crazy stats. And, so he's not that well known, but he's still going to get paid. I'm sure there are people in the league circles who know who he is, and they're going to want to pay him around $10 million or so. But I don't think anybody's going to want to pay him close to $20 million like they would probably with J.J. Watt or Leonard Williams. J.J., I'm not saying he's going to get 20, but I think he could probably get 15. And then if you're talking about 15 and 10, with Dalvin 10, that's a $5 million cap difference. That's like a whole nother backup, offensive lineman that you really need, or even a starter depending on the situation. Like, that's a starting tight end right there. That's a new tight end in case we move on from Evan Engram. $5 million, or it's just a way to sign our draft picks in April. You need that $5 million to get your draft picks underneath the salary cap. So that $5 million is a big deal to me in this scenario, and in terms of the scheme fit, I'm just going about scheme fit. That's more important than anything to me here, because we've seen talented players leave teams, go to new teams, and not fit their scheme, and then just not look like good players anymore, right? Like, that's happened before, and I don't want to see that happen with, this situation when, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Or if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Like, our interior defensive line is great. Let's keep it as it is. Keep the continuity going. Keep building with Patrick Graham and this defensive line into 2021 and beyond.
I would prefer it too. I mean, realistically, I would prefer to keep everyone the same. We saw what the continuity did for them this past year. 1 year of experience under Patrick Graham's scheme, and it can only get better, in my opinion. And then you get some outside linebackers back. Like I mentioned, Carter, Ximenez. Maybe you draft somebody or sign somebody, and you're in good shape. You have a pretty solid foundation in the trenches. Now, this kind of spiraled in my head while I was talking about it. If the Giants, since they don't have this just plethora of cap space to use, they're really putting a lot of chips in. And, we talk about the wide receiver. If the Giants do end up re-signing Leonard Williams and Dalvin Thompson, they're not going to have the money to sign a big-time wide receiver. That's kind of the reality of the situation. Now, are you okay with continuing to put all of our chips in on the fact that Saquon Barkley, will be healthy? Because that's really what the Giants have been doing. The Giants have been putting all their chips in for the past 2 years on Saquon Barkley being healthy on offense and him being their catalyst. But after 2 seasons, I'm not sure I'm ready to put all my chips on Saquon again and then have no wide receivers. You can't re-sign a wide receiver. You can't sign one in free agency, and then maybe you're drafting a weapon on offense. But is that enough? Are you okay, Anthony? I know Anthony's response to this already. I think that we should make a whole another video on this topic alone.
Alex,
it's tough.
You got to stop asking me questions about Saquon Barkley. People are going to start to hate me. Because I love Saquon Barkley. He is so talented. He's such a good player. He's so fun to watch, and he is such a good person off the field. And I've got memorabilia signed by him. Like, I love Saquon Barkley, but people always are gonna think that I'm a Saquon Barkley hater when I say things like running backs don't matter. You do not build an NFL team around the running back. So if you're asking me how I feel about the Giants building their team around the running back, I don't feel very good about it, and I haven't felt good about it for a long time. So no, I don't think that Saquon Barkley being injected back into this offense, and if we're predicating that on him staying healthy, which running backs historically struggle to do, which is why you don't build a team around the running back, because they struggle to stay healthy and they need a good offensive line and a good play caller just to have a baseline of success, right? All of these things that running backs require in order to be successful. That's why you don't build your team around the running back. I don't even know how we got to this topic of discussion in a JJ Watt video. This is very
I'll tell you why.
Topic.
I'll tell you why. It spirals back.
Tie it in for me.
I'll tie it in because the point I was trying to make was if you don't believe that you can put your chips out on Saquon Barkley, that means the Giants can't re-sign Dalvin Thompson, and it means they have to go and find a wide receiver, which means they have to find a way to fill that zero tech position. Because if you're going to sign Leonard Williams and Dalvin Thompson, it's going to be really hard. I have a plan
for that.
Okay. No, I would love to hear it. I would love to hear the plan.
You already know my plan, dude. Yeah, I know. Saquon's going to come back.
Is that the Alan McNeil plan?
It's the Alan McNeil plan. We talked about this in a video a little while ago. It's not even just Alan McNeil. I have found a few interior defensive linemen, zero techs, later on in this draft class.
Tommy Tagai. Really I love Tommy Tagai.
Tommy Tagai is another one that I pointed out to Alex. He's the one out of Ohio State University. There's a guy out of USC that I like. There's a few of them. Like, there's a few, everybody's talking about the interior defensive lineman class. Well, nobody's talking about the IDL class this draft season. But that's because there's none of those premier standout guys for the first round. But if people were talking about it, they would be saying there's a lot of hidden gems in those middle rounds. I promise you, if you go look for that, if you go look and do some research on those interior defensive linemen, there are a few guys in those middle rounds that I think can really contribute to an NFL team. I love Alan McNeil. I really like Tommy Tagai. I like the guy out of USC as well. I can't remember his name. Sorry for that. Go find him if you want. I have a plan for that, though, Alex. If that's what we're talking about building around Saquon, but also needing a wide receiver. Get the receiver. You can find a middle round zero technique if you have to. I would love to keep Dalvin as well. I would love to keep Dalvin over anything, really. But, the Giants do need a wide receiver desperately. Yep, you can't build around a running back. You need a receiving
the reality.
threat. That is the reality of it.
Yes.
Like, Daniel Jones needs somebody to throw the ball to. He needs somebody who he knows is going to be healthy and on the field and making plays in the passing game. Not the running game, but the passing game. So, yes, the Giants need to get a receiver. Running backs are very difficult to build a team around. It's kind of impossible sometimes. I can't even think of an example where they built in the past 10 years where a team was built around a running back and won a Super Bowl. I don't know if you can, but can't think of one. So Giants need to get a receiving threat and figure out the Dalvin Thompson situation after that, really. Yeah,
it's really difficult, like as you said, for running backs to stay healthy. Look at, like, Ezekiel Elliott's the only guy that really, they tried to build the offense around, and it worked pretty well. but they didn't make a Super Bowl.
They
didn't make a
couldn't
Super Bowl.
get past that.
Exactly.
They didn't have the money to put in this spot or that spot because so much tied up into that running back position, and I don't know.
And even Dalvin Cook tore his ACL too. You know,
Yes.
these guys. This is what happens to running backs. It's really difficult. So I don't think the Giants can push all their chips in again on Saquon being healthy.
One thing I'll say about Dalvin Cook, that's a really good example because he tore his ACL. I think the team still went to the playoffs. He comes back, has an absolute monster season, and they miss the playoffs. So running backs really, you know, if you had a quarterback step in and have a monster season, your team is likely going to the playoffs. But you have a running back step in and have a monster season, they're still not guaranteed to make the playoffs. You know what I mean? So it's just, in terms of building around a running back, the passing game is king in this NFL. The running game is just not as important anymore. That's just, to me, that's fact. You can call it opinion, but that's pretty much what I see. So,
well, I mean, what your opinion is really is the exact opposite of what Dave Gettleman's is. You know, because the Giants really have been trying to
I'm very well aware of that.
Oh yeah, they've been trying to force feed us Saquon Barkley on offense. You know, that's their whole offense is predicated on the fact that Saquon is going to be an elite threat from the backfield, and that hasn't been the case with the injuries.
And he is.
He is. That's not the argument though. The argument is not even an argument. The reality is he is elite from the backfield when he's on the field, but he has been on the field, and the Giants have been trying to play through the run, and it's not working. And you can't consistently rely. This is old school mentality. You can't rely on, you know, running backs to carry your offense anymore because they're so injury prone, especially finesse guys like Saquon who use their knees a lot and they really stop on a dime and they take a lot of really dangerous cuts. It was only a matter of time, and everyone basically was just waiting for it to happen, and it happened. So now we move on. You know, we saw Dalvin Cook return and have just an absolute monster year this year and the past couple of years, really. So Saquon, I think he's going to come back. He's going to be fine. It'll take him a couple of weeks to shake the rust off, get confidence on that knee again. But he's just so strong and just strong-willed. I think he'll be okay. But I think now is the time to go and find a wide receiver and draft an offensive weapon because we can no longer keep pushing on all of our chips on Saquon Barkley. It's not working. Our offense ranked had 17.5 points per game. The year before that, they're not that much better. I think they average 22 points per game. We need to take a step forward, and it starts with getting a wide receiver in free agency and getting whether it's Kyle Pitts, you know, Jalen Waddle, whoever it's on the board for us. That is the primary focus for me now, getting two weapons this offseason that aren't Saquon Barkley.
I completely agree. More offensive weapons and figure out the defense after you figure out the offense, because offense is champion a lot of the times in today's NFL. You know, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, who are slowly building what looks like could be a dynasty. They're in back-to-back Super Bowls. That hasn't happened in a long time, you know. A team winning backto-back Super Bowls, you know, is very rare. So if they're able to win that, we're definitely talking about them as the next dynasty. I think we're talking about that. I think we're mentioning them as the next dynasty anyway, even though they haven't won the second Super Bowl yet. But, you know, they're a very offense-heavy team. So many playmakers, so many weapons. That's the new formula for success in today's NFL, and I'd really like to see the Giants get behind that, start building that way. But we'll see what happens, man. We will see what they do. It's going to be one interesting offseason. That much we know. Whether J.J. Watt gets cut or not remains to be seen. It'll be interesting to see where he goes if he does get cut. And I do see some argument for the Giants, you know, picking him up, as we mentioned earlier. But overall, for me, I would prefer to just stay away. I'm actually not crazy about J.J. Watt to the Giants. So, but any of you who have different opinions, let us know in the comment section. Reach out to us on Twitter. Reach out to us in the Discord. Join the Discord. We can chat about it there. You know, we love to hear fans' opinions, so let's hear it.
Absolutely, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this J.J. Watt scenario. Hypothetical video, going through a few different ideas of how the Giants might be able to approach this if they even wanted to in the first place. But of course, this is all based on rumors. Just the fact that the Houston Texans might want to cut him, might want to trade him, and that they really haven't given him much clarity in terms of where he's going to be playing and what his role is on the team moving forward with 1 year left on his deal. So as always, guys, thank you so much for the support. Make sure to go check out the Deshaun Watson argument we had 2 days ago, and then we just posted a video on Kadarius Toney and Rondale Moore. Really awesome stuff there. Two electrifying playmakers on offense. Make sure to go check out that video too. Obviously, the links will be throughout the video. You'll be able to click on the suggested ones that I'll put throughout. So as always, thank you guys so much. We will catch you guys on the next one.